this is Lemmy with RevZilla. I'm down here in Daytona Beach, Florida for Bike Week. Man, we're getting a little respite from the weather. We came down to Bike Week so we could get some warm weather to get us away from that terrible, terrible snowstorm that's pounding the Northeast, but unfortunately, the tail end of it actually seems to be hitting us here in Florida as well. The sea is angry, my friends. But hell, it's Bike Week. We're gonna ride anyway. Now, the folks at Indian Motorcycle invited us over to check out their new line of Chieftains. Now, for those of you who aren't super familiar with the Chieftain, it's a very easy bike to explain. This is a full-size dresser that has a fork-mounted fairing. Now, we're talking about the Chieftain family of bikes. Things sort of start with their most inexpensive model, the Chieftain Dark Horse. One paint color on that puppy, it's a very basic, straightforward bike. Step up into a standard Chieftain, which you can see here, and your money gets you a couple other options. Note the additional chrome, say on the front end as well as on the engine. There's also, too, a passenger setup. You can see there's a pillion seat here as well as P-pegs down below. Perhaps most importantly, though, for 2017 is the ride command system Indian has rolled out to compete with Harley's infotainment system. However, they didn't have us down here to test existing models. No, instead they're adding 2 models to the Chieftain lineup, making the Chieftain more of a family at this point than a model. And those 2 are the Chieftain Limited as well as the Chieftain Elite. Now, the Chieftain Limited has some interesting visual cues on here. Notice the surround around the headlight. That's paint matched to the fairing. Also, if you go a little bit farther south, you'll see the really big news here, a 19-inch contrast cut wheel, which you can see specifically because they sawed that fender back and got rid of the very heavily balanced, traditional appearing fender. It really does bring a modern look to what was otherwise a very conservative appearing touring bike. Now, if we look at the Chieftain Elite, what is now the top dog in the Chieftain lineup, it has all of the same features of the Limited with a couple more thrown on top, starting with the paint. Notice this beautiful marbleized paint on here. This is unique and individual to every single Chieftain Elite on here because it's hand applied. Also, check out the lighting up here. You've got a full complement of LED lights. Both the headlight as well as the passing lamps really help to illuminate the road. Now, there's some other niceties sprinkled about this motorcycle as well. Check out the floorboards down here. These are big billet aluminum pieces, and footboards extend to the passenger as well. Rather than receiving the P-pegs, the other Chieftain models, mini floorboards for the passenger are included on this model. If you notice too, on these saddlebag lids, you'll see some speakers buried in there. 4-channel stereo is rock stock out of the box on a Chieftain Elite. It's a very custom touch on what is otherwise a factory offering. So we're going to be spending a little bit of time on the Chieftain Elite today in order to compare it to its stablemates as well as some of the Harley-Davidson offerings and find out if this bike is really worth what Indian is asking for it. Now, while I'm gearing up to get out there on the road, make sure you click that subscribe button so you can check out all the cool video content we're rolling out here at RevZilla.com. Whether it's a bike review like this one, or perhaps you're checking out one of our repair and maintenance videos, or Anthony or Spurge is walking you through the latest and greatest piece of motorcycle gear, we got you covered on just about the entire moto front. Alrighty, what do you say we get some miles under these tires? Woo-wee, there's that Florida sunshine I was looking for. Now, you guys may remember when we were at Daytona last year, I had a chance to get on the Indian Springfield as well as the Chieftain, and I came away pretty impressed with those motorcycles. I thought they were going to make some very serious inroads into some of Harley's customer base. However, Indian has made a couple changes to their motorcycle, and Harley's definitely made a few to theirs, so it really is time to kind of reassess and see how these bikes stack up against one another once again. So we can kick things off with the engine. Now, I was really impressed with the Thunderstroke 111, and that's really has gone unchanged, I think, in this entire time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. This engine is just the quintessential American touring machine power plant. Lots of prodigious torque right off idle. This is just this beefy, meaty motor. If you like roll-on power, the Thunderstroke 111 is probably for you. Now, I remember thinking that this thing really was giving Harley a run for its money on that twin cam. But if you've been following along with this sector of motorcycling, you know that the twin cam is no more. Harley has replaced it with the Milwaukee 8 engine, and that engine really is just a little bit different than the Thunderstroke. It's really, it breathes a little better upstairs. I think that's going to be an engine that's better for those with a different riding style. I don't know that I fall on one side of this camp or the other, but I do feel like your riding style is going to help you figure out which one of these engines you identify with a little bit better. Whether you're going to be modifying it, how far you're going to take that, and also really how you ride your bike. If you tend to wrap out each gear, maybe the Thunderstroke 111 is not for you, but again, if you sort of like that laid back, low and slow cruising, the Thunderstroke 111 might be where it's at. So let's move on to stopping. Now stopping is one of those areas where I feel like the Indian is doing really well. If you check out that front fender up there, you can finally see Indian put these brakes out there on display. They finally removed that caliper cover, and you can see these big old dual discs up there doing their job. This bike stops totally appropriately for the class. Note that I said for the class. If you've never ridden a big American dresser, you do have to remember efficacy is hampered slightly by the fact that you are slowing down half a ton of motorcycle. Still though, these things are right in line with what you'd expect. Now I'm going to give Indian sort of the nod here on the braking, specifically because this bike, though it has ABS, does not have linked brakes. That's not the case with Harley-Davidson. If you want to get the ABS option with Harley, you're locked into their reflex system, which has semi-linked brakes. They tend to link up at about 25 miles an hour or so. I'm not a huge fan of linked brakes, so I'm going to, again, give the win to Indian on this one. Depending on how you feel about linked brakes, you may see it as a feature. I kind of view it as a bug. So let's move on to suspension and handling. Now the first thing I was curious about when I saw this bike obviously is the handling. With that big honking wheel up front, again, you expect the handling to change. However, Indian definitely did their homework on this motorcycle. The width of the tire is exactly the same as it is on the more conventional wheel sizes found on the other Chieftains and other Indian touring bikes. However, even though the wheel is bigger, the OD of the total tire is almost exactly the same. So what does that mean to the end user? It's almost totally transparent. Really, this bike handles very similarly to other bikes in the touring lineup. You'd be hard-pressed to tell which bike you were on if no one told you. So I think that's a big winner. Indian did a great job designing that. Now, of course, when it comes to the actual suspension of this bike, go back to last year. I felt like the Springfield embarrassed its Harley competition. However, Harley's upped the game. They redesigned both ends of the suspension on their bike, and I gotta say, they've really approached the Indian quality here. Kind of even Steven as far as I'm concerned for out-of-the-box suspension options as they stand right now. I'm going to give a slight nod though to Indian in the handling and suspension department, if nothing else but for ground clearance. If you look at my footboards, they sit up a little bit higher, and I know I can toss this a little deeper into a turn than a Harley-Davidson will allow. One of the other cool parts about that ground clearance thing too are the mufflers. If you check them out on this thing, they're actually Frenched up into the saddlebags. That's going to be appreciated by any of you guys who have tried to back your bike into a parking spot and rashed up your pretty new mufflers against a curb. Again, the fact that I can get this thing sideways too, between the better handling and the clearance, leads me to be a little bit happier personally on the Indian. We're in Florida, home of the string straight road, so really I can't demonstrate it for you, but I also rode this thing in San Diego. Take it from me, this thing will get down and boogie in a corner. So the one part of the ride we haven't really discussed yet is the part that Indian probably worked hardest on, and that's the ride command system. It's going to be safer for me to show you this stuff if I'm not actually on the bike and operating it, so let's pull over to the side of the road and I'll show you some of the features. Now, we talked about Harley making some drivetrain and chassis refinements, but Indian wasn't asleep at the wheel when it came to R&D. Instead, they chose to focus their efforts on electronics, hence the ride command system. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when you walk up to a ride command equipped bike is the touchscreen. It's 7 inches, a full ½ inch larger than the Harley-Davidson competitor, which rolled out a few years ago on their Rushmore motorcycles. Now, it's not just the size of the screen that matters. Instead, it's a bunch of other things too. The Indian system has better resolution. It also offers more pixels and a faster boot time as well. The system gets up to speed and just feels a little bit more usable than Harley's setup. Let's look at the hardware for just a moment too. We'll talk about the different screens on there. Now, Harley uses a resistive style touchscreen, and that's kind of the standard for touchscreens. One of the advantages is it lets you keep your gloves on while you're using the touchscreen on the motorcycle. The Indian setup also allows that. However, they use a different style touchscreen. It's called projective capacitive. It's kind of interesting. Those touchscreens actually enable multiple inputs, and one of the other things they also do too is recognize movement upon the screen. So when you're moving your fingers on the screen, it actually picks up on that. So commands like pinching and swiping from your cell phone actually translate directly to the Indian setup. It feels quite a bit more sophisticated than Harley's poke and hope sort of method. So it doesn't just stop there though. Indian was also thinking about connectivity as well as longevity. Now, in terms of connectivity, both of these bikes are Bluetooth equipped. That means you can hook up your cell phone or perhaps a Sena or a Cardo Bluetooth unit for communications and you're off to the races. Now in terms of longevity, well, these are both updatable. Indian seems to be using the Tesla model. Instead of having you trade in your motorcycle, instead they're trying to encourage early adopters to come along by letting them know that Easter eggs are going to be coming up down the line. For instance, right now they're working on adding multiple waypoints to their GPS system. Anywhere between 20 and 100 are being bandied about right now. This is going to be a big feature for those of you who like to do poker runs. You can simply load in all of your stops, sit back and enjoy the ride and let the GPS do the work. Now, of course, getting these updates is very simple. Throw a thumb drive in your computer, download the update, put it onto the bike. If for some reason you are a technophobe though, you can always swing the bike by your Indian dealer, have a cup of coffee, and let them take care of the update. Now, I had some more thoughts about that, and you can check them out in my Common Tread article. Be sure to cruise on over there, and don't forget to subscribe to us so you can check out other video content we're making here at RevZilla.com. I've still got a little bit of daylight left, and it is bike week, so I'm gonna get out there and do a little more riding. I'm Lemmy, I'm out of here.